Welcome to the Responsible Parent Podcast, where families who are overwhelmed can learn about naturally regulating their nervous system. I'm your host, Caylie Alberts, and in each episode, we'll dive into topics that you've been wanting to learn more about, but haven't had the chance to yet. Today, I'm so excited to welcome our friend Lesley Alberts to the show. She is the host of Kindred Journey podcast, and she just had me on her podcast last week, which I feel so grateful for. And we had such a great conversation and so much that we still needed to dive into and so many questions that we still had for each other. And so we decided to connect again this week and figured we might as well make it into an episode because it seems our conversations are really helpful to each other as parents. And so we figure it hopefully will be for you as well. So welcome, Lesley.
Thank you, Caylie, so much. I feel so honored to be on your podcast and that our souls have connected and crossed paths on this wonderful journey of podcasting. I just am so grateful. And I do have, since I felt like the responsible parent, it is a parenting podcast. So full disclosure, I do have my two littles playing in the
Yep.
background independently. And so if there's
Yep.
some background noise, I apologize, but that's part of parenting, right?
Yep. Exactly. Absolutely love it. And you and I are both working moms. We both have corporate jobs full time. And so I feel like that's another area we connect on. And it's funny because I have been really blessed to have great bosses and in general, like direct managers at least, who understand that I'm a single mom and are really just, I wouldn't necessarily say accommodating, but at least understanding of that fact throughout my career. But right now, my boss is incredibly accommodating and he is just, his heart is so open that it's easy for kids to perceive, I think. And so when I'm one-on-ones with him, my daughter comes in and like chats with him and tells him like her most intimate secrets. But it's really cool. And so I feel like it's so important to have that environment too. This isn't work. We see podcasting sometimes as something that we need to show up with our best selves for. And I feel like you can't really be a better self than your mom. And if you're in the middle of parenting, that's exactly what people need to hear and witness too, which I think is amazing. Oh, hi, Bridget.
I couldn't agree more. And I do. I feel like it's the best hat that I do wear right now is
Yeah.
being a mom to these two boys. And I'm super grateful that God's given me such a easy second, especially because I am also single parenting in the moment because my husband is a wildland firefighter and gone all the summer. So my hat goes off to you. Bless you, buddy. And, yeah, all the baby coos and noises in the background. He's probably going to be entertaining, a blessing, entertain
Yeah.
blessings, but also very distractive. I'm like, I could
I'll
just
keep
stare
you
at
on
all
track.
day. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it's important. I think after COVID, there was a lot of shifts in corporations, especially like working from home and having to Zoom your kid through school. I was not in that phase of parenting and working, but I can empathize and relate with so many parents that had to experience that because my kids were not born yet when COVID happened. So
Mhm.
I think just having that flexibility. I'm an agricultural real estate appraiser by day. And so I appraise farms and ranches mostly for lending transactions. And my trainer that trained me was a mom who worked from home, who had three kids. And so I really valued that when I was being trained by her because I felt like the importance of being able to be a mom and also have
Mhm.
a career path or another desire other than a mom. I think it's sometimes hard. Like, I'm very lucky to have the work-life flexible balance that I do have with the industry that I'm in, and it is a very niche. I think we talked about that last week. I
Yeah.
don't know if it was on or off the podcast, but, like, it is a niche industry that I'm in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we'll get to nervous system regulation in a little bit and talking
Yeah.
about that, but just to expand upon this topic as well, I think the
Mm.
moment I met you, I automatically had so much like respect and regard for you because we touched on this in your podcast episode, but we'll touch on it for a moment here. I met you at the end of May this year in 2024 because we were part of Kathy Heller's Your Turn to Podcast container where we learned how to effectively podcast, right? And that's why we have this platform we do now. And she had a live event in Hollywood at the end of May that if we wanted to come out, we could, and we could all gather in person. And it was a 2-day podcasting / inspirational seminar, which was so incredible. And that's where I met you, and you brought baby Bridger, and it was so cool because you were the only person there with a baby. And he was just seeing you in your full self, like, I am a business owner. I'm also here by myself. I also have my son with me, and we flew from Boise, Idaho out here because we're doing this, and I'm not compromising being a mom. And I'm also not compromising doing my passions, right? And showing up for what I know God made me in this world. And it was just such a beautiful thing to see you in the first place, but then also just how incredibly supportive all of the women were in the community. And so it was the first time I'd really seen strangers just completely come to be your support system, like anybody's support system. Just a bunch of women in a room together, and we're like, okay, I'll take the baby. I'll take the baby. Hi, my name's so and so. I have this podcast. I'll take the baby. So magical. And it seriously brought me to tears. And so I just wanted to say that too. I think it was so magical meeting you for the first time and seeing that, witnessing that journey of yours. Just they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Like that picture in my mind was just like, oh, wow, that's incredible. So happy to see her showing up this way.
Thank you so much for that. And it was, I truly feel like I would say a mother's love, but it wasn't. It was just love. The women that showed up for me in that moment so I
Mhm.
could focus on the sound bath or take
Mhm.
notes. And there were grandmas, there were aunties, there were
Mhm.
people who weren't moms. Like I said, my prerequisite for holding my son was to know your first name.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I knew we were safe in a room of sick women. I'm not just like a
Yeah.
careless mom, but
Yeah.
no, it was such a beautiful experience, and it gave me what we talk about on my podcast right now is choosing courage over comfort, and it
Mhm.
to have the courage to step into going, it that
Mhm.
morning, I was like, "Oh, shit." I hope I can say that word, but, like,
Yes.
I'm like, "I what am I doing?"
Mhm.
I didn't really stop and think about it, and sometimes I think that's where my husband and I balance each other out, is
Mhm.
I lead with dreams and desires
Yeah.
sometimes, and I'm responsible. But he's the one who, like, thinks through every situation,
Mhm.
analyzes what can go wrong and what will go wrong before
Mhm.
doing something, and I don't. I'm just like, "They'll figure it out," which
Yeah.
I think it's a great
Trust the
balance.
universe. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Uh,
I understand that, and my podcast name is the Responsible Parent Podcast, and a part of that is because it is tongue in cheek because a lot of the things that I've done on my parenting journey aren't necessarily what we were taught was responsible necessarily. And yeah, I feel like seeing you, the reason that made such a big impact on me was because you were doing something that especially the generations before us would probably say isn't necessarily the most responsible parent move. And so it really resonated with me because it's the most responsible thing you can possibly do as a show your kids. I think one of the things our generation, one of the most devastating parts of our generation and generations before us is that there wasn't transparency from our parents. And we thought that they were God in some way, shape, or form, and that they weren't still just bigger kids learning how to do life and humans
Mhm.
just experiencing things as they go along and growing. And but I think that including our kids in the things that we do, not not selfishly, not only including them in the things that we do and not doing anything with them in mind, but including them when it makes sense, I feel is such a huge shift in responsibility and how we're being responsible a little bit differently than the generations before us.
yeah, and I can absolutely touch on that. I feel like doing that, I was like you said, I was doing it for showing my son my aspirations and goals are not gonna be put on hold because I am a mom, and I think that's part of a lot of great things came from COVID. Like, I'm
Mhm.
gonna take them along this journey with me,
Mhm.
and I want to be a parent that leads by example. I don't want to be a parent that says, "Do as I say, not as I do." And I think in doing so, chase your dreams. What would you tell your son if or your daughter, like, if they came to you and said they really wanted to do this thing,
Mhm.
but I can't because I have they don't have kids, but like another
Yeah.
example, "Oh, I have a soccer tournament," or whatever. I said, "What do you really wanna do? What lights you up? What's your passion?" And
Yeah.
to make those choices and, like I said, to lead by example, I think is so
Mhm.
important in parenting.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of parent I want to be. And I'm like, what's my goal? I want to raise kind humans. I
Mhm.
want to raise respectful humans. Like at the end of all of this, what's my goal and how am I going to go by getting there? So that's part of why I did what I did, because I knew it was important to me. And not only that, on my podcast, I have women come on to share their stories of courage. And I stepped into a courageous moment, whether I didn't realize it until it was that morning. I was
Yes.
getting on a flight and I was
Yeah.
leaving my 2-year-old at home with my parents, and my husband was in another state. Like truly, like the first time, again, I didn't
Mhm.
really think about it, but I'm like, he's safe. He's
Yeah.
with my parents. They raised me. But and I'm going to stay in an Airbnb with women I've never met.
Yep.
I got in a Uber with women that I met through the Facebook group of all these women, but I know the
Yeah.
women that Kathy attracts. So I
Yes.
knew I was safe. It
Yeah.
wasn't like I was going to a foreign country it was
Mhm.
definitely an adventure in a sense, but how many women came up to me at that event and said, "Thank you for doing this because it
Yeah.
shows me what I'm." One gal was pregnant and she said, "This is my
Mhm.
second, and I'm fearful that I'm gonna just get stuck
Yeah.
in, oh, I'm in this season, but it is a season, but it will
Yeah.
pass." And
Mhm.
I think also to what gave me inspiration from that event is I can do things that bring me joy
Mhm.
while being a mom. And being a
Yeah.
mom just doesn't have to put me in a category. So I
Yeah.
felt like that was a very monumental shift in my motherhood journey and in
Yeah.
my life as well, taking the courageous act to go down there by myself, to
Yeah.
take my 2.5, I think he was 2 months old
Mhm.
at the time, 2.5 months, a baby.
Yeah. Baby.
But it was, and who I met from it. And that's what I asked myself when I did have some anxious thoughts going on, getting ready to get on the plane that morning. How am I going to feel after doing this hard thing versus not going and not doing the hard thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, thank you for saying that. Oh, and just you guys aren't gonna be able to see her, but she's like full parenting mode right now and breastfeeding and talking to her other child, and like still conducting this interview somehow, which also women are incredible. Like we do all this and keep it all straight in our heads. I have no idea. But and
Some days
uh,
are easier than others. Let
for
me
sure.
just say that.
Yes, absolutely. I know the past week or so, my mind hasn't it's stopped working in a web and all of a sudden just became very like linear and like linear box thinking, like very masculine. And it's been so difficult for me because I'm like, if it's not the next thing on my list, I can't think about it. But, anyways, I wanted to touch on what you're talking about because I feel like it's also worth being said because I think this conversation, I can already feel it has to be really triggering for some moms, especially if they are really deep in my identity as a mom and that's it. So I just want to mention too, it's this conversation about you doing things that bring you joy as well as a mom. It's not an either or. It's not you're not going to be a good mom or you're going to like brush off some things that you'd normally do as a mom because you're going to this conference. Like the thing that was moving was because you were being a mom and showing up in your full self and also showing up for other parts of yourself. It's a both and thing. And it's not overwhelming when it's both and because breastfeeding, taking care of your kid, being in the resting phase of this new parenting part of your life is important. And it does bring joy because it is something that is natural, right? Also, what's natural for you is wanting to do your podcast, wanting to listen to other women, let them share their stories, right? And so I just wanted to bring up that important delineation as well. It's not you're doing this because you're selfish and you're saying, I'm going to do what I want no matter what. Who cares if I popped out babies? No, I popped out babies. I'm a great mom. And also, there's other parts of myself that are worth feeding, right?
Yeah. And I'm still Lesley, right? I'm
Yeah.
not just a mom. And let me preface that everybody's story and journey is their own, right? I think also, let me actually preface where this podcast originated from. If I didn't become a mom, I wouldn't have this podcast. It actually stemmed from becoming a mom. So it's actually very fascinating. I might need just 1 second.
Yep. Go for it.
To outdoor, we have a step to outdoor play area.
Oh, yeah.
And he's barbecuing for me right now. And he couldn't
Oh,
open his barbecue. So he was getting a little frustrated.
making something yummy.
Making some, yeah, some lunch. But yeah, this podcast wouldn't have come to fruition if it wasn't for becoming a mom, because I do feel like I was honestly grieving a little bit of my old self. I had kids later in life. Not later, but in my 30s versus my 20s, and I feel like I knew who I was. And my husband and I got married in our 30s, and I bought my own house. I was established in my routines, and I feel like motherhood rocked me a little bit as far
Mm,
as I was grieving my old life and my old
mhm,
chapters in life, and I didn't have time for intentional conversations anymore, like with
mhm,
my
mhm.
girlfriends. And so that's where this podcast stemmed from. So I can have honest, raw connection and conversation with women and be a mom at the same during nap time or not during nap time.
Right now.
Anyways, sorry, I'm
Nope, you're
trying to
fine.
pass the baby off and try and get attention. My help has arrived.
Aw,
So I can have a meaningful
there we go. You're
conversation.
fine.
Like you said, hats off to us moms and all that we do.
Exactly, and it truly takes a village,
It
right?
does.
And
It
and that's
does.
okay too. I feel like since moving to my new house, that's something even just before that, just this year in general, actually, yeah, it's really been this whole 2024. Something that I've been working on is being open to receiving because I was raised by a single mom who's extremely headstrong and she had to be, yes, but also that's her personality. It
Mhm.
runs through her blood because her mom is the same way and she's not a single mom and she's very headstrong. So I come from a line of really stubborn women and being a single mom, being in survival mode so much, it's been hard for me to receive, I
Mm.
think, in many ways. I've also attracted partners who cannot give, right? So that's a
Interesting.
part of my healing journey as well, is they feel inadequate, they don't have anything to give, they feel like they can't give enough, so they just don't give anything financially, emotionally, physically. Been really interesting. So these are things that I've worked through, right, over the past 5 years or so as well, but despite or not despite, in addition to that, and because of that, something that I've been working on is receiving help. And so even since moving here over the past month, we have neighbors that have offered help to us, to me already. Somebody came and just mowed my lawn because I'd posted in the group that I was like, hey, are there any teenagers who can come mow? Pay them 20 bucks or whatever. My mower just broke on me halfway through the yard. It looks like my yard has a mohawk. And this woman was like, what's your address? She literally just came and mowed my lawn. And I was like, I'm in the middle of meetings right now and I can't even come out and say hi and thank you. And she's like, that's fine. Don't worry about it. And just came and mowed my lawn. And then my neighbors right next door have given us so much help as well. And it's just has been this like journey of going, okay, they see that I'm a single mom and they're like, heck yes, I can help. Heck yes, I have a mower. I can come do this. Heck yes. And then that receiving, because that's such a big part of we say that parenting, it takes, what is it? It takes a village, right? To raise
Yeah.
kids. It really does. Like you being willing to, was it your mother-in-law you said? Your mom?
My mom is actually here.
Your mom,
Yes.
yeah, like, being willing to call your mom even as, "Mom, can you please come over and watch the kids for a little bit?" Sometimes it takes a lot for us to admit that we want them to do that for us,
Right.
especially if we didn't see them do that while they were raising us,
Right.
and so being able to set that precedent of, "I can receive help. It does take a village. I'm willing to let people come in and be a part of this life with me so we can all be a little bit freer."
No, absolutely. And I can absolutely relate. It does take a little bit more logistics for this village. And I'm sure you can relate when your daughter was a little bit younger. Like, we don't live
Mhm.
anywhere close to family.
Yeah.
So my village and my exercise the muscle I've been strengthening, I should say, is
Mhm.
my ability to ask for help, because by
Mhm.
nature I am a doer.
Mhm.
And I always have been a go-getter,
Yeah.
but it doesn't work that way when you become a mom, because you
Yeah.
still have the same 24 hours that you did prior to being a mom. And I feel like our culture has been conditioned to, oh, pop the baby out and get right back to work. But it's like this in other countries, this is a full like on blessing and experience around mothers and the baby and this new life and this new
Mhm.
relationship. Like, I've been learning so much about that in the
Mhm.
last few years. And so I can definitely relate to you as far as receiving, and it
Mhm.
truly does take courage to receive. And I've been
Mhm.
on, or I've had another episode that I've been on, or I've talked on my podcast about talking about receiving and the courage it does take because, and to come back to God and love and receive,
Mhm.
giving, and how good it felt probably for your neighbor to be able to give that to you, to
Mhm.
know that she
Yeah.
like, it didn't cost anything. It cost a little bit of gas and a
Yeah.
little bit of blade sharpenness on their blade of their
Yeah.
mower. I know how that goes because my husband sharpens our blade.
Yeah.
He's like, "Have you been mowing again? Like, these things are dull." All right. But anyways, yeah, it does take courage to receive, and that's something I've been learning in this motherhood journey. Like, I can't do it alone,
Mhm.
especially right now being a single parent
Mhm.
for the summer. I couldn't have done it without some of the women in my life that have come over to help me watch
Mhm.
my kids so I could go get a massage and take that time for myself. That's another thing I feel like I didn't see a lot of growing up is I know self-care is a buzzy vibe, but like truly I feel like moms are the foundation of everything. God is the foundation for sure, but like of the house, like moms buy the food, cook the meals for the most part. I'm generalizing here, but just knowing when the next doctor's appointment is, knowing when the shoe size runs. Oh, gotta go
The
get more
spider
shoes.
web brain thing we are talking
Yeah,
about
like you
earlier.
said,
You
the
have to know
spider web,
everything. Yeah.
and it's so much. And like you said, some days you're on and you can do it, and other days it's nope, I surrender. I'm going to bed.
Yep.
Night, but it
At
is.
2 PM. Yep.
Yeah, at 2 o'clock. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And truly, I feel like it's not recognized. Or that was something I did not anticipate
Mhm.
becoming a mom, the overwhelm that comes with motherhood.
Massive CEO level coordination 24/7. And I
Mhm.
say 24/7 because we all do it in our dreams too, in our sleep. Like it's literally like all of the time we are coordinating and facilitating and calendar mapping and thinking ahead and retrospecting and all of the things, right? It's insanity. It's such a precious gift that sometimes I wish I were a male so I wouldn't have to have such an incredible but men are such a gift as well. In male thinking is and action is such a gift, right? For them, nothing would get done because we would always be in our heads if we didn't have the masculine, right? To show up and to do that, even the masculine and feminine within ourselves. Yeah, I feel like it's so valid. And yeah, but because of that, if we're not used to taking on that matriarchal role, when we do step into that, usually it's about this time, like when you step into your 30s, all of a sudden this matriarch cap comes on you and you're like, "Oh, wait, okay, now I run everything." And even if you're not a parent, I feel like it just starts to happen, whether it be in your extended family or just your work or any part of your life. And so it's a really interesting time if you're not used to wearing that cap or to having that role to say, "Okay, I thought I could do this all on my own. But since all of this is now my responsibility because I can do it, it's the same thing with entrepreneurship. If you're really good, if you like love art and you're like, I'm really good at graphic design and I know Canva really well. And also I want to write books and then also I want to publish them. So I'm going to illustrate it and I'm going to write it and I'm going to publish it. And then I'm going to manage the money flow and then I'm going to manage the ads. You can do all of that, like, you have the capability of it, but then you have to take a hit to your ego to say, just because you can doesn't mean you should
Mhm.
be the CEO, and you need to hire in people to do all of those things,
Mhm.
right, for the rest of your business, otherwise it's never gonna scale because you have a capacity.
Right.
You're a human, and it can't go past that, and so I feel like it's the same with motherhood or just the matriarchal stage of your life, regardless of whether you're a mom or not, is to just be like, "Okay, I can do all of this, and I'm used to doing these parts individually, but now that they're coming all together, I have to hire out." Now, whether that
Mhm.
actually means paying or exchanging energy in other ways is one thing, right? Like, first, I didn't pay them to come take my yard waste, but I will pay them back in some way. I'll
Right.
help them in some other way, and we'll exchange services. And yeah, I feel like it's something that how do you prepare families for that and
Mhm.
mothers for that? I don't even know.
You and I.
Yeah,
No, I would also reiterate what you just said about your neighbor. Like, I will repay them in some way, but sometimes receiving it's a gift, right? Like, it
right.
like unconditional love, and that's Jesus, right? Jesus gives us unconditional love. He doesn't need anything, and God doesn't need anything in return from us
Yeah,
for their love. Like, it's
yeah.
just it's
It's just
and
giving.
It's just giving, and I think that's
Valid.
part of being a mom, like, you
Mhm.
wanna give these kids the world. We love them so much, and I want them to be happy, but I also want them to be well-balanced, respectable, kind humans, like,
Yeah.
there's boundaries that come into play with that, so I just think and I've heard on this on a podcast, so I'm not coming up with this on my own, but it's the domestic CEO role, like, it
Sure.
truly is, and I feel like I was blessed enough to get additional maternity leave with this 2nd son of mine, because I was
Mhm.
supposed to go back. So, like, literally, my husband left for fire season the day after I was supposed to go back to work from
Mhm.
having 12 weeks off, which is a blessing in itself. I knew in my heart and soul that if I wouldn't have asked for more time off, I had postpartum depression with my first son, and I knew that would flare up if I was also recovering from my 2nd C-section. So if I was still on the mend, because I could still feel I was not back to my full self, but to take care of a 35-pound toddler and
Mhm.
another baby and go back to work at my full-time role as a 9 to 5 appraiser
Mhm.
and have full-time job of breastfeeding. I didn't realize that until this. I told our mutual friend, I said, "Did you know that breastfeeding equates to a full-time job?" Like she's like, "You didn't know that?" And I'm like, "No."
I didn't know that either, but it makes total sense. Yeah, this is it's something you don't think about because 'cause we're programmed to think that's not the main it's not the main thing you should concentrate on, like, full-time means corporate job or
Exactly.
away from
Yes.
home job,
And I
and
think
so you
that's
don't think of it in those contexts.
1000%. So think of all the full-time roles that we're doing as moms, and like you said, in our sleep, it is 24/7, and I think that's probably one of the hardest things, the hardest shifts that I've had to make as far as, like,
Mhm.
productive, like, on paper, my productivity as a employee is, "Okay, get this job done, you make this fee. Okay,
Mhm.
this is measurable." The productivity in motherhood for me, this is my personal
Mhm.
experience, is that, "Oh, I'm not productive today. Oh, I haven't done the laundry. I haven't made the best warm meal. It's leftover chicken nuggets from the microwave from last night." But to really give ourselves grace and credit at keeping 2 humans alive is so productive. Every
Ab
and it's not recognized in society. Like you said, we were talking earlier, get back to your 9 to 5, get back to being productive. It's like the hardest thing for me right now is reminding myself to pump. So I've had to, like, going back to my 9 to 5, I've
Mhm.
had to set timers to pump because I forget, okay, now I've got to, and that's, I think, when they say go back to being normal or go back to being productive, and I'm using air quotes for those of you that can't see me, there is no such thing because now I have this
Mhm.
new role and I have this new layer and this new, like you said, I have the same 24 hours a day
Yep.
that I did when I was single, when I was dating my husband, when I got married and no
Mhm.
kids. Like,
Mhm.
there is no such thing as going back to my old self. Like, that's a
Right.
chapter that has closed and we are on
Yeah.
to the next one. And so I think to also release that pressure from give
Mhm.
myself the permission slip of saying, "Wesley, like, that has ended. Like, you are not gonna be working nights and weekends to hit that bonus or to hit your exceeded fee income. There's no way.
Mhm.
This role that you have assumed, and it's such a blessing, has taken over majority of your 24 hours a day. So let's get realistic and give yourself some grace and release some old expectations." And so I've really been trying to work through that. And, in doing so, I feel like I've honestly never been an anxious person, but ever since motherhood, this anxiety of taking care of another human, having this additional role and responsibility that, yes, it's such a blessing and a gift, and it's the best, hardest thing I've ever done. But it has some angst to it, and it has some
Mhm.
anxiety that I've gained through, and like I said, the postpartum depression that I had. I know how to manage it and I see the triggers that get set off with it. So I'm able to reel it in a lot sooner and quicker than I was with my first. And
Which thank goodness. It's vital that you have that tool bag, right? Like you've found tools that work for yourself to get yourself back to center or center-ish, right?
yeah,
And center-ish
ish,
is probably a
ish.
better yeah, the stage of motherhood. Like you got 2 young ones, like center isn't gonna be very attainable, unfortunately, but oh my gosh. So what you were saying is so incredible. I literally had I don't know how to like idea after idea as you're saying this. Oh my gosh. So I was like writing them all down. But one of the things I wanted to relate that to is so currently I'm a project manager. in an IT department for a large corporation. And one of the things I talked to my boss about today is reporting on our project. We have several different, how do I put this? Several different metrics that we report on, and to basically take the temperature of how well the project is going. And so one of them is scope. And scope means what is being covered essentially, and how long is that going to take, and just what is being controlled and covered within this entire project. And within the current project that I'm working on, we were supposed to be taking a technology and using all of its systems out of the box, which essentially means as it comes. And if we weren't going to use it out of the box and we would need the technology to be reconfigured in some way, then obviously the scope changes, right? Instead of it taking us 18 months to implement, it could take 20 months or 24 months or 3 years or whatever, depending on how much additional configuration needs to be done to the technology itself. And so this is in my head freshly because I just had a meeting with him about this today. And as you're talking, that's what I see your life explanation as is you have the same 24 hours. And then we're pretending that the scope is still the same when you're adding so much extra work, so much extra expenses, so much extra resources that are being demanded. And then you're saying, but you still are going to keep the scope the same size because we have the same 24 hours. And it's 100% complete bullshit. There's no possible way. So, like right now with my project, that's pretty much what I have to go back to our leadership team and say, this is 100% complete bullshit. We're not going to get done on the same time. Look at all this extra stuff you want from us. We need extra people. We need extra time. We need extra money. Are you going to afford us that? Or are you going to say, no, that's okay. We'll take it out of the box. And it's the same with motherhood or every new stage of life. If you don't have the extra time and the extra money and the extra resources, the extra people, then you have to expect much less from yourself,
Mhm.
right? Or expect much less or a different scope of your considering your life to be successful,
Right.
right? And
Yeah, and oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, it's okay.
I actually, in the beginning of my appraisal report assignments, we talk about it. We have a scope of work, so I can
Yeah,
totally relate to what you're touching on in a different aspect. But
yeah.
I think what you were saying as far as the domestic CEO role that we
Mhm.
all play, like just what you were sharing, your scope within your IT job, but also within your motherhood job, and you have to manage it, and you have to also delegate, like kind of what you're saying on this entrepreneurial journey. I think that's probably one thing I get the most overwhelmed with. Like, I've started this podcast as a passion project and would love to turn it into something more wherever God willing, whatever he provides for me. But also, like, it's overwhelming to me because I'm like, don't want to do that part of it. Don't want to
Yep,
do that.
yep,
But I'm not making any money yet. So how
yep.
do I delegate
Can't
this
hire
to?
it.
Yeah. So it is definitely like small micro doses, got to start small. And then I would much rather delegate somebody to clean my house and I'll mow the lawn while my husband's gone. So it's just finding what and I think finding what serves you and what calls to you and lights you up, whatever journey you're on with if it's a corporate job or a motherhood role or and by the way, like a full-time mom is a full-time job. It like being a stay-at-home
Plus,
mom,
yeah, like 3
yeah,
full-time
like
jobs. Yep.
yeah, like being a stay-at-home mom is a full-time and I don't think that's also given enough credit in our society. Like you do it. You stay home with those kids all day and hold the space for them when they're holding and when they're having a meltdown. Like it's not and to be that space and that container for
Mhm.
one kid, multiple kids, in yourself all day, every day,
So that itself, you're essentially a full-time therapist, right? And so that's one of the full-time jobs you're holding, and while simultaneously being a full-time cleaner, while
housekeep
simultaneously yeah, being
a
a full-time
chef.
cook, yep,
Yeah, like you're holding so many facets
yeah,
in one role, like it's
yeah.
amazing and hats off to them. And I got a taste of it this summer, like having that extra time to be home with my children was important to me. And what I'm seeing right now, my 2-year-old is really struggling. We have somebody come into our home 3 days a week to be
Mhm,
with them. So I bust my tail at my office 3 days a week to get 40 hours of work done in 3 days
mhm.
and then hold the space for them 2 days a week.
Yeah.
that are not weekend days, work
Mm.
days, and then still while nap time's in play, I can get a little bit of done, but I'm not gonna have the same capacity that I am 3 days a week. But also my son coming home to him at the end of the day, he's okay, dad's gone,
It's
mom's gone,
emotional.
uh,
Yeah.
uh, mom's now gone 3 more days a week. Like, I'm seeing it in my toddler, and it's breaking my heart because it's like, "Oh, I have to be the one that holds the space for him extra now, not just for the days that I'm
Mhm.
gone and working, but dad's gone too." There's that, like you said, that masculine role is so
Mhm.
important in child rearing,
Yeah.
and it's a balance. So I'm noticing it, and not the fact that Granger is trying to take it out on me or he had a hard day. Like, he holds his emotions in until I get home, and then
Oh,
he
yeah.
just lets him go, and I just have to sit there and be the space for him.
Mhm.
And I think that's also something, like you were talking about generations before us, like something I hear my husband say, and I don't even think he consciously is aware of it, but he says, "Oh, stop
Mhm.
crying." And he's 2.
Yep. It's not
He
gonna do
doesn't
anything.
know what he's feeling, like, but I don't think my husband knows he's saying it, and he doesn't say it in, like, a disciplinary
Automatics.
way, but it's just, "Oh, stop crying." And I think
Yeah.
that was something the generation before us really did, like, especially with male versus female. He's a boy, stop, don't show your emotions, be tough. And it's but to hold the space and to let Granger feel those feelings without having an attachment or an expectation of them, I think is
Mm.
so important as not just his mom, but also the father role right now. Like, I need to also nurture him, but play with him and wrestle
Yeah.
him and have that balance. Like, it's something I've definitely taken into more awareness since I've been doing, I don't want to say the work, but like I've been on this
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
self-discovery journey as a mother.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's so beautiful. And I think a couple of things I want to touch on that you just said was number one, when you're holding the space for your kids, it's not just about the time that it takes to hold the space. It's also like we have to, if we were to project manage this, okay, let's project manage motherhood. If we were to add in how much time it takes to appropriately hold space for kids, it's not just the time you're directly holding space for them, right? It's making sure there's time scheduled into every day to make sure that you're regulated so that you
Mhm.
can. And then in addition to that, it's holding space for them. And then in addition to that, it's time afterwards to downregulate yourself as well.
Mhm.
Because there are things that come up. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. Sometimes after you hold space for them, you're like, I am freaking exhausted and I actually just need a nap or like to lay down with my kids now and we can watch a movie and snuggle or whatever, depending on what the situation is, right? Like your kids are young for the most part. The breakdowns are not small, I'm sure, but they're not about complex issues yet
Mhm.
necessarily. Like
Right.
it's at least fairly straightforward. But as kids age, their emotions get more complex and their breakdowns are more complex. And then they start making you question shit about yourself, your
Mhm.
childhood, and like all the thing. And then it's not just holding space in that moment for them. It's literally a whole thing.
Mhm.
Literally, like I said, it's like a full-time therapist because it brings up so many extra parts to life that did not exist. They were not accessible yet until those sorts of parenting moments happen, right? And it's not just about holding the space during that time, it's about all of the time and energy it takes in order to properly hold space for them and then in order to like not let it mess you up after,
Yeah.
which
Oh
is
my
so.
gosh. Yeah, like I said, I feel like I've been on this motherhood journey, and I don't know if we're ready to tap into that part of the conversation, but it will be a month Saturday that I no, it's actually been a little over a month since I don't want to say I've hit rock bottom, but I know only 30 days. Come on, Leslie. No. But I feel like the lid just like things have been building and building. And then I feel like the lid just blew off like a month ago.
Mhm,
And I had a really and I don't wanna this is again, I'm speaking for myself. I'm like I said, let me see how I can word this, like, I'm not trying to offend anybody, I'm just saying my experience, like,
mhm,
I did truly have postpartum depression with my
mhm,
first son. I created awareness and space around what caused that postpartum depression with having my second one because I noticed
mhm,
days where it was harder than other days,
mhm,
and it was lack of sleep, lack
mhm,
of support.
mhm,
Those are the 2 that are like that start to I start to down spiral. being a single mom, no family near, and a newborn baby,
Mhm.
lack of sleep and lack of support. And there
Absolutely.
were days that were harder than others. And capacity. I feel like honoring my capacity because that looks different every single day. And do I feel like I had postpartum depression with this second baby? I feel like there were instances that if I wouldn't have regulated and managed better or caught it in time, that I could have slipped into that. But I don't know if I technically had it, quote unquote, with this son. But it's because I was proactive for myself and asked for more time off. And when I noticed I had a hard day or a sleepless night, I would ask for support to come over and help me hold the baby so I could take a nap. Or
Yep.
things that maybe look selfish in our society. I feel like I was proactive about helping myself. So I think I don't so I to go where I wanna go, I guess, about a month ago, I had a really hard day. It was one of my hardest days since my second son was born, and I spiraled hard. I cried. I called my parents. I said, "I can't do this anymore. I'm done." And not in a way of I'm gonna do anything about it,
Mm.
but I'm like, "I something has to
I
change.
can't. Yeah.
I cannot do this anymore." I was reacting. I was being triggered by Granger when he would have a meltdown, and I
Mhm.
would just blow up and be like, "What do you want? What do you need from me?" And
Mm.
I couldn't hold the space for him. I couldn't be there for my son. I was like, "I don't wanna be this kind of parent. I don't wanna be this
Mhm.
kind of mother." So, again, creating space to have awareness, like, you can't change what you don't notice. And
Mhm.
I was noticing I did not wanna be this version of myself. I didn't wanna be this
Mhm.
version of their mother. And yeah, so I guess you can call it a come to Jesus about a month ago, like
Yeah.
happy hour couldn't come soon enough, and
Mhm.
bedtime couldn't come soon enough, or nap time
Yeah.
couldn't come soon enough. Like, I was
Mhm.
truly not in a good space mentally. Like,
Mhm.
so yeah, so I was the only one that could change my I couldn't change my circumstance because it is what it is, right? My husband's
Mhm.
gone. I have 2 kids. I'm going back to work. I started back to work August 1st.
Mhm.
And so what am I gonna do differently about this? So I made the change within myself. And so I have been pretty much sober. Like I chose not to drink unless I'm in like a social setting or at dinner. Like it's
Mhm.
not a let's start drinking at 2 o'clock while the kids are napping by myself. Not doing that wine time on the patio by myself
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah,
Mhm.
because I found that was a spiral trigger. It would be something that would cause me to go towards the downward spiral. Like I
Mhm.
mentioned, the sleep, the lack of support.
Mhm.
I've been meditating, I would say for a little over a year, pretty almost every day. I think that was I would try and take a nap when the kids nap or just take 30 minutes to meditate and just do that, like shut down a little bit. But I have been doing a nervous system reset
Mhm.
and I did a free 5-day course a few weeks ago. I was right after this had happened and I would say that was, like, huge needle shift. Like, I was like, "Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, what's next?" I knew a pitch was coming. I know how
Yeah.
these things work. I know the system, but I'm
Yeah.
like, "What's next? Because
Yeah.
this is working.
Let me
This
give
is
you my money.
amazing."
Yeah.
Yeah, "Let me give you my money. I will pay you to help me." And so I
Mhm.
think I'm in day it's a 21-day nervous system reset, and it
Mhm.
is and I was Googling stuff about nervous system because I felt like I was just constantly in a fight or flight, defensive response. My husband would always ask, like, "Why are you so defensive? Why do you feel the Leslie, I just asked you, is the coffee fresh or not?" Something
Mhm.
super stupid, and I'd be like, "I just made it, like, hope
Yeah.
you like it." But it was
Yeah.
just I was so triggered by everything and just so
Mhm.
overstimulated, and it's hard as a mom. I think, again, like, the mental load and the things that they don't prepare you for motherhood, and to acknowledge sometimes it is you feel shame around it or guilt or I shouldn't feel this way. God bless me with these babies. And I'm so blessed and grateful. But it's a lot. Like you said, to be that container in that space. And if your system isn't regulated, and like you said, you can unpack some things from childhood and I'm growing in such a way that is this a dream? I'm like in that state of euphoric.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, is this happening? Is this I've been waiting and pushing that glass ceiling and it's like I said, the top just fell off. So I did a spiritual hygiene yoga practice where it was meditative. It wasn't really actual yoga movement, but it was more
Mhm.
meditative. And that opened my meditation from that was just opening some visuals like I had a vision of fire and literally, I don't like just flames. And my ranch, literally, my family's ranch and my parents got evacuated. I don't know how many days later. I was like, oh my gosh. Fortunately, everybody got to go home. But it was like just some of the things that came from that practice was just eye opening. And so I'm just grateful that I chose to make a decision to step out of where I was
Mhm.
because I feel like I don't know where we would be by the end of summer with my husband coming home with between my relationship with my kids. I can actually hold the space for my oldest son and not have a response of overreaction or what do I need to do to fix this? Like a mother hen feeling, just take the chicks and run from the hawk kind of feeling like that.
Yeah.
I don't have that anymore. I can calmly hold the space for him and say, "Oh, honey, like I feel for you." Like that empathy versus sympathy and not trying to fix it, but just be there for him. I think that's super important also. And anyways, like I said, I've just been making huge shifts and it's almost been 30 days since that my spiritual hygiene yoga class that I did. And then, like I said, I with this nervous system reset, they say set an intention. I say it's a prayer. I take it to God. I and also starting my mornings with my devotional and my Bible and just truly sit there and drink my cup of coffee in the morning. It
Mhm.
is so hard in this season with a baby who's not sleep trained. I
Mhm.
use that in parentheses as well.
Yeah.
And to have a toddler that's in like a sleep regression or molars or whatever you it's like his sleep's been super wacky lately. I blame the moon the last
Yeah.
week. I feel like the moon had so much like
What's
weird
happening?
energy. Like it was
Yeah.
like a lot of vibration, but then it was
Yeah.
like a lot of retraction. So I don't
Yeah.
know what happened, but
Absolutely.
I blame the moon. But yeah, no, I feel like my diet's cleaned up. Like I said, I don't want to drink. My husband had some wine the other night and I just didn't want I didn't need it. It's just been such a huge transformational shift for me in 30 days, and I feel like an infomercial.
Yeah. No.
Right now, but I'm just
It's
like
just 40 days raging.
psychopath. No,
Yeah.
no, truly, I am just so grateful on this journey that I'm on, and I've been praying for it, and I've been asking God, "What do you want me to know? What do you want me to do?" And I listen, and I sometimes there's not just survive. Like we're
Yeah.
gonna are in a survival mode right now, and that's also hard with. I think that's also what's helping me hold the space is regulating my own nervous system and releasing some of these things that I've probably held on to for far too long. Like I said, I've been the habits of being defensive or hold my beer. I use that term loosely, but hold my
Mhm.
beer and watch this kind of
Yeah.
attitude. Oh, you're going to tell me what to do? Okay, fine. I'm going to do that. But it's
Yeah.
no, I'm just giving you suggestions or guidance, mostly coming from my husband, for example. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
so yeah, again, that falls in the line of defensiveness. I just find myself truly stepping into my full authentic self as far as like motherhood goes and Lesley goes and pursuing this podcast and moving forward with this podcast. I actually got asked to speak at a women's brunch at my church in October.
That's wonderful.
I just signed up to be on the committee because I felt like it was a calling. And then we go into the room to get details, and they're like, okay, great. You're going to be the speaker. Awesome. If that's what
But
I was like, if the Lord's calling me to do that, then that's what I will
yes.
do. If that's what I'm meant to be. So I just feel like he's working in ways that I didn't personally have the capacity for until now.
Mhm.
And to take a step back, like I said, I feel like I'm like, is this my life happening in front of me or is this something else that's going on?
Yeah.
Like I just that's the euphoric feeling that I'm feeling right now. And so I'm just super blessed and grateful for when he showed this to me, is when I was ready for it. And I had to be at that state and that space of hard
Mm.
in order to see that this was the way out. This was the path that
Mhm.
he has set aside for me.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I just want to commend you too. So I think what I am feeling right now, Leslie, is that's always the path. Your path is always there. God is always talking to us. It's always lit up before us. It's how open we are to receiving that information.
Mhm.
And I feel like this is the perfect way to talk about nervous system regulation because when your nervous system is overwhelmed and you are in fight or flight and you are in that 5 o'clock can't come soon enough mentality, that 5 o'clock can't come soon enough means I need to disassociate. right? That's what that means. Life is too overwhelming. I
Detach.
need to disassociate. And so it's the complete opposite of connection. And alcohol is the same. Alcohol disassociates you. It's a complete opposite of connection, right? And so the more open we are to receive, the more connected we realize we already are, right? And there are so many things that we're connected with. And when our nervous system is regulated, then you can start to notice some of those connections, right?
Mhm.
Some of them are really good. And it's that feeling of euphoria that you have right now. Oh my gosh, it feels so good that I'm connected in this way and I can follow this stream. Some of them aren't so good. Oh my gosh, I noticed now that I was reacting in this way because of X, Y, and Z. I want to correct that, but I wouldn't have been able to pinpoint it if I wasn't regulated enough to notice what was
Mhm.
even happening and the connections that are already made to my soul, to my energy centers, to my physical body, to my life, right? There's so many different layers of being a human. And I think that is the perfect example that you just gave, all of the things that you talked about how I don't even think it was like you regulated your nervous system and then all of these things opened up for you. And this is my own personal opinion. I think they were always there. You just you couldn't see them until you regulated your nervous system. And instead of disassociating and like essentially like closing, like putting your hands over your eyes and saying, I don't see anything, there's nothing here. You went, oh, okay. All right. Now I can see what's here. And that's the, at least when, as you're explaining it to me, that's what I see is that journey for you. And I think that
Yeah.
that's here for us all always. And that's why it's so important.
I think it's capacity. I think
Yep.
regulating your nervous system opens
Mhm.
up your capacity to
Sure.
receive.
Yes.
And I think I did not have the capacity to receive what, like you said, I can agree with what you're saying
Mhm.
because, like you said, God's path for all of us is what it is. Like He knew all of the hairs on our head before we were born. It's just so amazing. He's so amazing.
Yeah.
And I'll share this little story with you that kind of, I've shared how the podcast originated, and we had a really hard season. And I won't go into the full details of that because we don't have enough time, but of hard a few years ago. And I think that's where a lot of this dysregulation has stemmed. Not all of it, but just
Mhm.
a lot of the
It builds.
overwhelm. It builds. Yeah. And I would say that this season of hard was right after we got married. It was less than a year into marriage. Like the for better for worse, sickness and health, richer for poor. Like we got the latter of all of
That's
those. Yeah. Honeymoon stage done. On right after we got married, he went to fire season. So he was gone. So I was really by myself. But and then all this stuff unfolded. And like while we were able to conceive our first child pretty quickly after marriage, which we're so lucky and blessed for, it was like, what a blessing. But then, oh, this big health trial that we had to hit. And it was huge. Like it was a bomb dropped on our family. And I would say that was a hard season, and I would say that actually my women's mentor, her husband married us, Seth and I, and it was such a beautiful it just how it all came together, but they're so prominent in our life, and they did our premarital counseling, and both of them, and so it was a
Mhm.
great interesting contrast with both a married couple that we respect and love so much, did our premarital counseling, but she gave me a book by Jamie Winship, and it's called Living Fearless, and he was a DC police officer and God called him to go to Baghdad during the war and take his family, and the stories in this book is just and he starts every morning asking, "What do you want me to know, and what do you want me to do?" And asks it to God, and "Who am I? What's my name? What do you call me?" And so I read this book. It was the January was it after I had my son? I can't remember now. I think it was almost I would say he was about 8 months old. She gave me this book for Christmas, and I read it right away in January, and I was like, "Okay, God, who am I? What do you want? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to know?" I was ready. I thought I was ready to receive. He never came to me, and normally I feel like God comes to me in dreams, or I get these what are those, like, the sliding door moments, like, in dreams, I feel and
Mhm.
but one day I was sitting at the table with my women's mentor and another dear friend of mine, and we were just talking and drinking coffee, and he came to me, like, promptly in my head and was like, "Emotional leader." It's like, what is that? I was like Googling what emotional leader means. Nothing really came up. Okay. That was January of 22. So the next year, 2023, I started I took the podcasting course and was like, okay, I'm going to start this podcast because I'm in motherhood and da, 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 da. So, anyways, like down the road, just like you said, it's always in front of you. The doors are always there. The path is always there. And I feel like he's really starting to pull back the layers of this emotional leader thing in ways that like I said, could never imagine. It's just part of my journey, part of my story. But I wanted to share that because
Yeah.
that's the origination of emotional leader. Okay, what's that mean?
Mhm.
Keeping doors open, but then starting the podcast. Okay, what's that? Look at all the wonderful connections I've made. I wouldn't trade anything in the world if this podcast goes away tomorrow. I'm just so grateful for the connections and the friendships that I've made from it so far. But I'm enjoying doing it for these reasons. And I feel like in my gut, the next door is going to open through
Mhm.
somebody that I meet through this podcast. So yeah, and I'm, like I said, I'm open and ready to receive now. And before I did not quite have the capacity to do.
Absolutely. That's so incredible. Thank you for sharing that part of your journey. Small part, but
Yeah.
feels
Yeah.
big, right? It feels
Mon,
big,
mon,
yeah. But I know that there's so much that is a part of your journey in general. And yeah, even emotional leadership. I really love that. I love that term. I love that path for you. That's really neat. And so I'm excited to be a witness to how that unfolds. And yeah, and that's really important in everybody's life, right? And I think that even like what you said about having that like vision of fire, I think there's some sort of we make it a huge deal with the gift of prophecy, and I feel like I have that too. But I think everybody has that. It's not really as much of a special gift as
mhm,
it is, as we talked about earlier, you just regulating yourself enough to be open, telling your mind to get out of the way also, right? Because when you're trying to think about something constantly, that's closing a bunch of doors. When you're allowing yourself to be in a meditation, that yoga that you talked about, and you're allowing yourself to be in a container where people are being mindful, you're opening up these connections as well, which also means you get to employ a certain amount of emotional intelligence, right? Because emotions are very much a part of our human experience, right?
mhm,
It's not so much of our spiritual bodies as emotions are really chemicals and magnets, right?
mhm.
And I've mentioned this a million times on this podcast because it's like the only book that I currently recommend, but it's called The Whole Brained Child. And it's written by a neuroscientist, doctor, and neuro neuroscientist slash doctor. Yeah, I think there's like, but anyways, but he talks about essentially breaks down what emotions really are, right? And what we're actually reacting to and all of the things. And it's a physical experience. There's neurons that fire and redirect in our brain. And it's a physical reaction that you can measure that's happening, which I think is really interesting. And so being an emotional leader directly ties to regulating your nervous system
Mm,
because your nervous system, again, it's not a spiritual thing. It's almost like, to me, what the way that I've seen this unfold over the past 6 months of me truly trying to understand like what nervous system regulation is through my podcast is it's almost like, fix this shit,
mhm,
get it working well, that it's not getting in the way, and then we can understand that connection with our spirit, right? We can understand spiritual connection and the energetic connections that we have with when we touch a plant and we go, "Oh wow, I feel like that's going to be really good for my throat." And then you go Google it and you're like, "Oh yeah, it actually helps your throat when it's sore," or whatever. There's energetic connection with everything, and then there's your spiritual connection with God. And so I feel like this just all directly relates so much to what we came here to talk about, which is incredible. So I love
mhm.
that. And also, I literally have an entire business idea written out now.
Perfect.
This conversation, I'm like, you know what all people need?
Great.
This. So I'll
They
probably
do.
connect with you after this.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think just to full circle our conversation, I love what you're doing here, especially like you said, your title is tongue in cheek, and I think we're in this new generation, and there's so much available to us.
Mhm.
And I think that emotional leader also ties to what I said in the beginning. I want to be a parent that leads by example. And so I want to be an emotional leader for my kids. I want to be
Yeah.
an emotional leader for my household. I want to lead for the people that I love the most. And so I just think that's just comes full circle and came to my mind after you were saying that. So thank you. And
Welcome.
just, yeah, it's such a beautiful space and conversation.
And with that, thank God that you had the breakdown you did a month
Yeah.
ago, right?
Yeah.
Because how could you be an emotional leader if you didn't have that complete breakdown moment where you're like, this is not okay. I don't want to handle my emotions this way. I don't want to blow up on my kids. I don't want to shut down. I don't want to wait for the 5 o'clock hour.
I've been living in such a victim mentality under the skin. Like I haven't realized what a victim role I've been playing for so long.
Mm.
And that takes radical ownership and radical responsibility to take.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's hard. I feel like I never saw myself having a victim mentality, but after you saying that, I feel like I need to do a reassessment
Hey,
in certain ways. Yeah.
yeah, I just think that you can't change the circumstance. I think that's what it came down
Mhm.
to for me was like,
Sure.
it is what it is this summer. This
Mhm.
is our reality and I can't change this. But what habits can I change and what can I change about myself?
Yeah.
And so a
What great
lot.
opportunities to build character, right? That's the
Oh,
kind of reframe I had to have over the past 4 years too, is like when I'm in situations that aren't fun, I was able, because I had a more regulated nervous system, to make that shift in my mentality and be like, "Oh, what a great opportunity to build character. Now I get to prove who I am when shit hits the fan." Now
mhm.
I get to prove who I am when my daughter comes to me and when my daughter cries nonstop for 7 days of the week. Who am I? What type of mom am I? Funny thing though is, and I think that you alluded to this as well, and maybe at least you can resonate, but life goes in stages, motherhood goes in stages. My nervous system is much less regulated right now, especially over the past couple months. And so I'm coming back to, for the first time in a very long time, probably like 7 years, this summer, because there was so much on my plate, was the first time where I'm like, actually, I also was waiting for happy hour. Like the weekend can't come soon enough. Can Olive goes to a friend's house. I just need, and then when she's gone, I'm not gonna clean. I'm literally just gonna lay on my face. I just can't. Life right now.
Mhm.
And so this conversation comes at a really good pivotal time for me. And that's why you told me about your 21-day nervous system reset. And I was like, yes, I need that. But I'm like, I need it. But also when we need it, it's the hardest time to implement because your nervous
Mhm.
system is usually overwhelmed because you have a lot on your plate. And I know we only have 10 minutes left. So I'm going to try to help wrap this up real quick. But
Mhm.
I'm wondering if we could skip ahead a little bit. If with the 21-day reset you are taking, which number one, I will definitely include all their information
Yeah.
in the links to underneath the show notes here. But with it, has there been a tool or a few where you have been implementing during this reset that you're like, this is so simple and like this I can do every day or whatever, every hour. Like this is what's been easy for me to like, grasp onto at the stage of motherhood you're in.
Yeah. I think so basically what it is, and I don't wanna give it away, but and because it's more than just breathing, but
Mhm.
truly stop and take a breath.
Yeah.
If you can, get out in nature. I would say put your feet in the grass or on the hot rocks or whatever is calling to you or you have available to you, because especially being a mom and in the stage that I'm in, it is hard to take and I feel like and that's what they encourage. It's called the Reconnected is who I'm doing this reset through. They offer it, I don't know how many times a year. I think once or twice a year, not very often, but Eleanor and Emma are their names. They're actually from Australia, and it's been interesting to see, like, a different country's perspective just and this came up when I was sitting on my front porch drinking a glass of wine, and I was
Mhm.
Googling about nervous systems, so that's actually how it came up, and this was, like, in between the rock bottom moment, I think, and my yoga class that I took, but so I would just say get in touch with nature. I feel like I think I shared with you, I listened to your podcast on the Cultivate with Chelsea podcast, and you said,
Mhm.
"Get in nature." It takes 17 minutes in nature. Like,
Yep.
going we just went on the slowest walk today. Granger, my oldest, wanted to get out and walk the dog. He wanted to walk I was like, "Okay." Just slowly walked with the stroller. The other one napped. So anyways, just nature, I would say, is definitely something I crave,
Mhm,
especially I live in a big city right now. I know this is not my forever home, but,
mhm.
like, for now, I have to make do with the ways I can connect with nature if possible. I just saw a hummingbird come in and take some nectar from one of my flowers. So it's just like the little things I would say, connect with nature, look at the sky. And I would say that's first and foremost. And then just maybe put your hand on your chest and just breathe.
Mhm,
Just like a few I try and do that every morning. I try and come out with the sunrise and say, "Lord, I hope this day is good." I take some cleansing breaths and I go back inside and start my day. So just little things like that. I would say just nature and breathing are probably my most essential, even if I don't have time for I don't want to call it the practice of breath work through this
mhm.
program that I'm doing. So I think, yeah, after this 20, I'm a little bit halfway, a little bit running halfway right now. So moving forward, I definitely just want to connect with God, say a little prayer, connect with my breath and nature and go about my day.
Thank you. That's so lovely. That's such a good reminder of it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to
Mm-mm.
pay extra money. You don't have to buy the things. You don't have to take the classes. It can be as simple as this incredibly intelligently designed ecosystem that we're a part of, like just connecting with it.
Yeah.
And I think also when I am in fight or flight mode, and there's things in my head that are spinning, and usually it's also, like, self-talk that's negative as well, and so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's not even like, if I go outside and greet the sunrise, my neighbors will think I'm a crazy woman, but sometimes it's, I think I'm a crazy woman if I go and do that, like, sometimes it's coming from myself, usually not, but lately it has been. I think that it's important, the most important thing that I'm taking from what the advice that you're giving is to say, it's the connection, right?
Mhm.
It's not like going outside and doing the things, yes, that absolutely will help regulate your nervous system on a biological level. But also, if you're just connecting, like you said, take a breath, put your hand on your heart, look at the sky. The reason you're looking at the sky is what? To observe, is to just pay attention to your breath, pay attention to what is happening in nature, pay attention to that hummingbird. And when you pay attention to that stuff, all of a sudden you're like, oh, your scope broadens, right? And you get to understand a little bit more that what you're focusing on isn't as important as all the things that are happening in the world right now, right? And so it's just that perspective shift. So
Yeah, and look at
thank
the moon. I looked at the
you.
moon. The full moon was the blue full moon was it a
Yep.
super moon too?
Super blue full moon in, yes, in Aquarius, which is nice and esoteric as well. So it's like,
Yeah, all the things. I'll just say one last thing, like, I am a Lutheran Christian,
mhm,
but I'm a spiritual Christian. Like, God made the universe, God made the
yeah,
sun and the moon, and I love being in nature. Like, I neighbors were my trees growing up, or
mhm,
trees were my neighbors growing up, I should say,
yeah,
and just knowing that's such an important piece of me, and I think that's
mhm,
also what's caused my dysregulated nervous system is living in a big city where everything is so fast paced and the traffic and so to know that and have awareness around that, to be like, okay, I need to just go sit in nature or sit in my grass or make those little micro moments happen is so key and so important.
absolutely. I
Well,
love
Kaylee,
that.
thank you.
Yes. Leslie, thank you so much for your time and
Of
for all of
course.
these good little nuggets of information and health and just for telling your story. It's so beautiful, and I know that it will resonate with so many moms. So I just really appreciate you. And how can people contact you or follow you?
Yeah. I am not the best millennial or whatever generation I am on social media, but I am on Instagram at The Kindred Journey. And you can also find me on Facebook as well. The Kindred Journey podcast on Apple and Spotify. I do try and put out an episode every week. And if you want to email me, that's probably the best way to get a hold of me is my first name. So it's Lesley at thekindredjourney.com. So I'll send that to you and you can include that in the show notes as well. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what people want to hear about. I talk about courage right now on the podcast and choosing courage over comfort. And I've been doing themes of the month lately. So trying on parenting for the month of August and moving forward with health, caregiving, and first responder wives. So I'm having a few topics come up in the next few months. So if anybody
Very cool.
has a story of courage in a season like that, I'd be happy to hear from you.
Wonderful. And Leslie is so great at just holding the space, which emotional leader, now I understand, but just holding the space for women to tell their stories, no matter what the story is. And as she mentioned to me before, whether or not it ticks and ties with her beliefs and her values, like she's just there to hold the space so that women can get these stories out. And I just have so much respect and reverence for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Caylie.
And I am grateful we are connected.
Me too.